Water quality impairment in Iowa and the Midwest remains a critical issue. The number one water quality material is sediment. Sediment that originated or is originating from farm fields supplies much of the sediment that we see in the streams today. Sediment impacts on reservoirs, on streams, on ditches is definitely a negative. But maybe more important, or as important economically, is the impact of sediment loss on farm field productivity. We know from research, farmers know from experience, that as topsoil thins, productivity goes down. Now you can challenge that a little bit because you say, well, through the past decades we continue to hear that we are losing soil faster than it's being regenerated, yet our yields continue to increase. Yields increase because of improved genetics and because of improved management. However, the thinning of topsoil gives us a yield drag that wouldn't exist if the topsoil remained as thick as it was in its native condition. Additionally, the topsoil thickness adds stability to yields. So the combination of elevated yields and stability proves to be a positive economic driver to keep soil in place. One of the challenges we see in topsoil loss is that occurs with gully erosion. Gully erosion occurs, or is typically defined as that soil that's lost in areas where water flows in concentrated channels during heavy rainfall and runoff events. There's a lot of energy in that water as it moves across the surface, and as that water is moving in those concentrated channel areas, it picks up sediment, soil particles, and carries it with it. We do see that on the average, soil erosion loss in Iowa in particular is about 5 tons per acre per year. That's a calculated estimate. That estimate, though, does not include the soils that are lost in gully erosion. So what happens? What do farmers do after we have a gully formed? Now, these gullies may be large enough that you need to use heavy, more aggressive equipment, or perhaps, as in many cases, we can fill those in with tillage operations. In those tillage operations, what do? We take soil from an adjoining area and move it to the area that has been channeled, that has had the gully formed. That increases productivity in the gully compared to what it would have been if filling didn't occur, makes it more farmable. What does it do on the side slope, though? What does it do from the borrow area? It reduces topsoil depth. And in reducing that topsoil depth, what does it do to productivity potential in that area? It lowers it. How do we explain, or how do we describe what happens as we borrow soil from the adjoining areas? If you take a look at that curve, you see one thing that I think is critically important. As the topsoil goes from being relatively thick, 8 to 12 to maybe 15, 18 inches, and we get to thinner and thinner topsoils, and we're down 5, 4, 3 inches, we see the yield decline is much greater as we lose an inch of soil than it is when we lose an inch of soil with a deep material. Through repeated borrowing from the sides to fill in these gully formed areas, we thin that layer to the point that we get down to those thinner topsoils, making each particular event more costly in terms of lost production as we borrow and fill. So the borrow concept to improve productivity in that channel has a negative consequence for the area surrounding the gully and the gully itself. What happens during the next rainstorm? That material that's in there is loose, it's flushed out, it's gone. What do? We borrow again. We continue to thin those adjoining areas. If we had armor in place, in this case we consider a grass waterway, the protective mechanism to keep soil in place in that channel, we do not need to borrow, we do not need to thin, and our productivity levels remain elevated. So the impact of flowing water across the field is significant as it relates to water quality impairment, as it relates to cost of sedimentation in reservoirs, streams, and ditches. It also is very significant as it impacts economic return on farms. By cutting and filling to fill in these waterways, what should be grass waterways, we're reducing productivity, and over the long term, it will have a negative economic impact if channelization, if gullies are continued to allow to form.